So, obviously we've been talking about this for quite a while today, and I've been listening, and I just heard some comments from the good senator talking about we need to do this because we have to save lives, and we have to listen to the law enforcement. I couldn't agree more that there is a problem with violence, with gun violence across the country, but yes, here in Connecticut. I'm sure everyone knows or heard of someone that was affected by it. You turn on the news and every other day, we're seeing it happen. It is a problem. We have to do something. But we have to come up with legislation that will actually address the problem at the root cause. And the good senator that just spoke before me said, you know, we have to do this, we have to do it now because we need to save lives. And we have to listen to our law enforcement. But I've had conversations with our law enforcement, and when we talk about who is committing the gun crimes and what type of weapons are being utilized, and it was in the judiciary public hearing, our law enforcement said these are illegal guns, most of which are not from Connecticut, and the individuals committing the crimes are not legal carriers, meaning they do not have pistol permits to carry. So if this passes, and it looks like it's going to pass, I do not believe the people that the good senator was mentioning that are committing these crimes, and it's horrific that people are in fact, you know, customizing these weapons and killing people in Connecticut, are going to listen to this law because they're disregarding many laws on the books, like don't possess an illegal firearm, don't modify your firearm, and don't harm other people. And they're disregarding those laws. So why do we believe that if we pass this piece of legislation, it is going to have any effect at all on the individuals that are committing these violent crimes? You know, I've only been up here for 6 years, but I've been a part of numerous gun debates. As one of the individuals mentioned in this long debate, they talked about a gun day, something that's, you know, it's a thing. It's a gun day. We're gonna have a bunch of bills about guns. And we talk about gun violence, and I really don't believe that we are hitting the mark. I don't think we're doing anything to address the real problem. We had a bill, I think it's 2 years ago, 6667, and again, a majority of the bill was targeted, in my opinion, towards legal gun owners. And in those public hearings, we heard that it's not the legal gun owners committing the crimes. Some would say, well, maybe it's their weapons not being properly stored or they're getting stolen. And that does happen. I'm not going to say that that's not how some of these weapons get on the streets here in Connecticut, but a majority come up from other states, come up 95 corridor. So to say that imposing stricter laws on already very strict laws, which I think there needs to be common sense gun legislation. I'm not saying everybody gets guns, right? No oversight, no background checks. I'm not saying that. We need to apply common sense when we're doing this to try to address the problem that we all agree on. We see it. We see it. Just turn on our TV. We hear from friends or loved ones that they or their family or someone they know was on the news the other day. It was, you know, John's cousin. This is terrible. That's a problem. But the legislation that we've been proposing, I do not think addresses it. But when we did do 6667, there was a part in there that allowed the judge to give up to a 30% cash bond. I believe it was on a second serious gun charge within a certain amount of time. I think it was 5 years. And in my opinion, I'm going to call that part bipartisan. I think some of the big city mayors, I think Hartford mayor at the time, the New Haven mayor at the time, testified in that public hearing and said, we're seeing the same individuals committing the crimes over and over again. We're seeing that they're getting arrested, they bond out, and that process, it doesn't really have much oversight. So if they know a bondsman, they have a good relationship, they could give them very minimal amount and they're back out on the streets, and then they're committing the gun violence again. And it's a cycle. And from asking questions, we heard that they'll adjudicate the individuals' cases that are incarcerated first. So someone that's out on the streets committing this crime over and over again could be arrested 2-3 times before they actually get their day in court. And most of the time they'll lump all 2-3 of those cases together and get a plea deal. But with that bill being passed, I personally believe that we see a reduction in gun violence, and I think that's to be celebrated. But I think that's actual common sense way to attack the problem at the root cause and going after individuals that completely disregard the law. I think we could go even a little bit further. You know, we see mental health as a real problem. We should look at that, right? But I think by just putting more laws on the books, when the majority of the people that it affects follow the law or they wouldn't be able to have a pistol permit in the first place, is silly. And then I think people get sensitive, right? Even if it was the smallest minute gun bill, and it could be really small, they're going to get excited about it because they're being targeted. They feel that way, and I can't disagree with them. You know, I don't think this bill, you know, does, again, anything that's going to address gun violence, but I don't think that it's, I'm going to get in trouble for this one, right? I don't think it's that terrible of a bill because Glock is already modifying their newer Glocks. They've seen the problem with their assembly and their manufacturing and the way that these weapons are put together, and they proactively addressed it. Very similar with AI. We've seen some AI companies build stuff so strong and has the hacking capability of 10 hackers it could do the work of 10 hackers in 10 minutes. They're good stewards. They said, we're not going to release this to the general public. Glock's doing that. Glock is changing the manufacturing of the weapon, and we're now putting this bill forward. So I don't see the need. I don't see the cost-benefit analysis, but I see a group of people that feel like they're targeted often here in Connecticut, just targeted again. You know, and if I really thought that this bill would save lives or have a meaningful impact on the violence we're seeing in our streets, I would say let me try to find a way to support that. But I do not believe that this does that at all. At all. And I was being interviewed today, and one of the reporters said, well, you know, we have very strong gun laws, and we haven't seen, knock on wood, a serious school shooting. And it's working. And I said, well, that's great that we haven't seen that. But I said, what about the things we're seeing in our cities every single day? That doesn't matter? That's a problem. And to address that, we need to come up with other types of legislation that targets and comes up with solutions instead of imposing arbitrary rules and laws that the law-abiding citizens will follow, but the individuals committing these bad acts will completely disregard. If they're willing to kill someone, I doubt they're going to say, well, let me not buy this Glock because I'm not going to want an increased penalty. I think they're way past that. And I think that it does have an impact on business, right? There are a bunch of Glocks that are third, fourth generation that the design may be flawed, or there may be a way that it can be modified and they could put a switch in there. But what are they going to do with those? Somebody wants to sell their weapons. Maybe somebody bought a bunch and they said, you want to know what? I want to go from Glock to SIG, and they have 6 of these weapons. I don't believe that they would be able to sell them to someone. Maybe to go back to the FFL, and the FFL then could sell it out of state somewhere. And I know the good senator has been asked a lot of questions, but if the good senator could answer that question, if after this law passes and somebody has some Glocks and they just don't want them any longer, would they be able to sell them to someone else? And if not, can they just sell them to an FFL through you, Madam President?
Senator Winfield, prepare yourself.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I'm trying to reorient myself back into the bill. If you give me a second. Okay, let's see. Thank you, Madam President, for the moment. No one, no individual, no firm, no partnership, no corporation. I'm in Section 3, by the way, if you care to follow me. Limited liability corporate company, on and on, may knowingly import into the state, right? Advertise, sell. So that would say that would not be able to be done with these types of implements.
Senator Cicarella.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you to the good senator. And I know that when there was laws with the others and people couldn't buy them any longer, but if you possess them, you would be able to sell them to an FFL, and then the FFL could sell them out of state. The way the good senator read that, it says just import something else and then sell at all. So I'm assuming that people who possess these in Connecticut have no other option but to maybe forfeit them. So in my opinion, I think it's kind of problematic, because if somebody has a lot of these, they invested into them, we're essentially saying they're stuck with them. And I think maybe that might be an unintended consequence. You know, these are the things that, when possibly trying to solve one problem, others get created. And I do believe it's unintentional, but these are the things that we have to really dive into and look at. You know, the good senator answered that question, and it made me think about something else. When we passed 6667, there was a part in there that legal, law-abiding gun owners who bought and registered, and I mean registered, the state of Connecticut understands what guns individuals have at this point. There's already a registry for these guns, right? You go to the gun store, you purchase the guns, they do their background check, they call the state police, and once it's purchased, they take all of that information, they take the serial numbers, and then it gets logged with the state police. And you literally could call up and say, I want to know what guns I have, what guns do I own. They have a whole list, right? And individuals believed that they already had their guns registered, because they believe that, well, if I go and say, hey, what guns do I have? And they give all of the list of guns, well, they would think they were registered. Now, when trying to implement that bill, and it was an act preventing gun violence, they were trying to find a way to stop gun violence, and they thought maybe those weapons shouldn't be possessed. I disagreed, but within that, individuals had to basically recertify or fill out a form to the same agency that already knows they have these weapons, because they're on that main list. And law-abiding citizens thinking, not realizing, didn't do that. And now some of these individuals are possessing these others, which they lawfully purchased. They believe that they're registered, but they didn't re-put in another form certifying that they have them, and they have some acknowledgement from the state police back saying, yep, we got your paperwork, you're all set. A lot of people didn't do that. We got a lot of calls saying, hey, what do I do now? And that's what made me think about this, because the individuals can't do anything with those guns right now. And they were saying, and I agree, they're saying it's unfair. I'm following the law. I'm following the rules. No one told me anything. State police didn't send me a letter in the mail saying I have to do this. They know I have these firearms. But now, even worse, I could be a felon, because technically I'm possessing another, and I can't do anything with it except just give it to the police, maybe in a buyback program, or just you relinquish the weapon for nothing. You just kind of give it to the police department. And some of these things are extremely expensive. So the reason why I mention that is it brings me back to individuals that may have these type of Glocks, the third and fourth generation Glocks now. If I have a bunch of these firearms, and I don't know, hopefully not too soon, but I'm going to move into a nursing home, and I'm getting old, and I want to give all of my stuff to my kids, right? A car and everything else that I have, a watch, jewelry, family heirlooms, and I have all these weapons. I can't even give my own kid those guns. And I don't understand how putting those type of unnecessary burdens on legal gun owners, people who follow the law or they wouldn't be able to have a pistol permit, have to deal with that, and then individuals who completely disregard the law are not going to be affected. This is going to have zero impact on them. And when we were talking earlier and discussing this bill and going over kind of who was going to talk about what, and one senator kind of talked about a lot, so he kind of took a lot of the topics that we wanted to talk about, but he had really good points that even in the public hearings, these are people that have so much training, not only with how to handle, not only how to clean and to shoot, but to fix, take it apart, swap parts out, do all different types of things with these weapons. Literally, it's their job. They're experts in it. And they were asking us, when we were trying to learn a little bit more about, how would this affect individuals and businesses and their profession, they didn't know what some of these parts were. They didn't know how to even begin to explain to us how it's going to affect their business. Because they said, we don't even know what a cruciform trigger is. So when we're going to be putting legislation into place, we gotta think to ourselves, is this going to do the intended goal and solve a problem without having unattended consequences? And I think some of the unattended consequences, simply put, we're going to have individuals that might unknowingly be breaking the law. It's an accidental thing, and they could be a felon. That's a pretty bad unintended consequence. Another one, you have individuals that own these now. Maybe they need money, they lost their jobs, they had to pay their electric bill, they wanted to go sell this. And now we're basically saying it's rendered worthless because they can't sell it. And we heard about saying we have to pass this now because it's going to save lives. If that were true, well, I think maybe then those unattended consequences. No. Let me rephrase. If that would stop gun violence in the state of Connecticut, that would be That would be worth it. You weigh that up, say no more gun violence if we were to pass this bill. All right, you're going to lose some money on a gun possibly, and if you didn't follow the rules, you may get wrapped up in this. If there be no more violence, no more pain, no more, things we have to see on the news, people's lives cut short for gun violence, maybe you'd have to consider this. But this will not affect the individuals that are already breaking the laws. It won't. We're not going to see a reduction in people that break the law already with these Glock switches, say, oh, they passed a bill, so now I'm not going to be using this. Simply not. And then we're going to have people that want to follow the law, but can't keep up with it, don't understand it. I think we have a hard time understanding it. And then we're going to tell them something that they had that was worth something is now rendered worthless. That is a huge problem in my book. And we talk about where does it go from here? I am a very, very reasonable person. I like to start from the middle, work my way out, understand both sides of an issue, and I think that's a really good way to conduct business here, and you learn a lot, right? You learn the pros and cons, even if it's not my bill, and somebody proposes something to me like, hey, I got a great idea for a bill. They tell me all about it. I'm like, oh, it sounds pretty good. Who would be against it and why? And then I go talk to them. And it's like, you ever watch the TV shows? You see the defense go up, they make their case. Then you see the prosecutor go after. If only the defense went, I'd say, oh, I'd believe that until you hear the other side. And all too often, we're seeing certain populations, and I don't want to say political, but it is a hot topic issue. Some people don't like guns. They're scary. They could really do a lot of damage to people. So it's a sensitive subject. There's other sensitive subjects, but we're not going to get into that. But there's certain things that people feel passionately about. And just as much as there are people that might hate and dislike guns, there's a large group of people that really like them. They really feel strongly that they should have access to them and their rights shouldn't be restricted. And they feel like every year, more and more legislation is coming out and it's targeting them, and they ask why. They're saying, well, we're not breaking laws, but this now has to happen. What about the people that are committing the crimes? That's what we have to ask ourselves. When are we going to start attacking the problem at the root cause? I think it was good Senator Fazio said that we like to create laws, but we don't like to enforce them. And we've seen this. It's not just with crime. We've seen this in business. We see bad actors in a business, and what happens? That industry gets more rules and regulations put on them. We need to go after the bad actors. That's what we have to do. I have just a couple of additional comments, and then I'll turn it over to whoever's going to be speaking next. But, we were talking about other public safety legislation, and one of the ones was school mapping, and I think it passed today. And someone says, well, what does that matter? School mapping, what do they need these maps for? And not today, yesterday, in the town of North Haven, there was a scare. There was a threat called in. They locked down the high school and the middle school, and people were calling because there was a ton of police activity. It was all over the social media, and people were extremely scared. They were worried. And the first thing they think of is a shooting. is a shooting. You know, passing laws like that mapping bill is a way to address some of the issues of responding to those situations. I feel that we are very reactive instead of proactive. And how I believe that we could be more proactive in situations like I was talking about before in an industry. You see a couple people finding a way to bend the rules, not follow the rules, is address that at its root cause and not try to circumvent it by adding more rules to that industry. Same thing applies here with the guns. And if that conversation was being had, I would be totally willing to find a way to support something to stop violence. But simply put, I do not see where that is. I do not see what this bill's positive impact would be to our community. So I cannot support the legislation, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same. Thank you.